There's a moment so brief you almost miss it. A silent split second when someone questions you, your character, your worth, your motives. And without thinking, you rush to explain yourself. You say, "That's not what I meant." You say, "You misunderstood me." You say, "I'm not like that." You think you're protecting yourself. You think you're restoring fairness. But in that exact instant, something invisible happens. You hand over your power. Because every defense is an admission that you need to be understood, that you care what they think, that their words, somehow, matter. And that's the moment Machiavelli would say, "You've already lost." He understood the cruel symmetry of power. The one who explains himself kneels. The one who remains silent rules. In the theater of human perception, the world doesn't see truth. It sees composure. It sees who flinches first. And when you defend, you flinch. You validate the attack. You step into the frame built to trap you. Most people will spend their entire lives trapped there, trying to prove their innocence, instead of mastering their presence. But what if you could reverse it? What if you could take every accusation, every attempt to diminish you, and make it fuel your aura instead? That's the trick Machiavelli understood before anyone else. Power isn't in argument, it's in silence. It's in what people believe you could say, but don't. And today, I'm going to show you how that silence becomes a weapon. Before we dive deeper, take a moment. If you find truth in what you've heard so far, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because what we're about to explore isn't advice. It's a transformation. And I want you to be the first to know when the next piece of this power drops. The world teaches you to defend yourself, to correct every misunderstanding, to make sure people get your intentions. Your parents told you to explain. The school told you to justify. Society rewards the one who sounds polite, rational, and reasonable. But Machiavelli saw through this illusion centuries ago. He understood that human beings don't respect fairness, they respect dominance. Not the loud kind, not the violent kind, but the quiet dominance that comes from someone who refuses to justify themselves. Because the moment you defend yourself, you're playing a game you've already lost. Why? Because defense operates on their terms. It accepts their framing. It admits that they have the right to question you. And once you accept that frame, they own you. Look closely at any confrontation, public, private, emotional. The person who rushes to explain always looks smaller. Not because they're wrong, but because the explanation smells like guilt. The more words you use, the more desperate you appear. The more you try to clear the air, the more the air thickens around you. People don't listen to your defense. They watch your reaction. They're not searching for truth. They're scanning for weakness, for the flinch, the hesitation, the break in tone that tells them they've hit something real. And this is what Machiavelli meant when he said, "Men judge more by their eyes than by their hands." It doesn't matter what you say is true. It matters what they see when you say it. Do they see calm, or do they see someone scrambling for validation? This is the brutal truth. Defending yourself doesn't restore your reputation, it ruins it. It turns confidence into insecurity, presence into performance, strength into noise. When you say, "That's not true," you don't sound strong. You sound uncertain. You sound like someone begging for permission to exist without being misunderstood. And no one fears a person who begs for understanding. They pity them. And pity is the opposite of power. The strong don't explain. They let the silence accuse the accuser. They let the other person fill the void with their own nervousness. Because every second of your silence, they start doubting their own words. They wonder, did I go too far? Did I misread him? Why isn't he reacting? And slowly, power shifts. Not because you fought back, but because you didn't. See, control isn't about domination, it's about direction. The person who defends is reacting. The person who stays still is directing. Because reaction means you've been moved. And the one who moves first loses. That's what Machiavelli meant when he spoke of the frame. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. When you defend, you accept their frame. You must explain yourself to me. When you stay calm, you flip it. Who are you to demand an explanation? Silence, when deliberate, becomes a mirror. It reflects the attacker's insecurity back at them. They start to unravel, fill the space, overtalk, repeat their accusation, because the lack of your response terrifies them. They can't stand the unknown. And that's when you become untouchable, not because you're invincible, but because you're unreadable. Machiavelli understood something most people never will. Power isn't what you say. Power is what people believe. You could say, but don't. And the gap between their curiosity and your silence, this is where fear is born. The world believes in proof. Power believes in perception. And when perception is on your side, proof becomes irrelevant. Even lies lose their power against someone who refuses to chase them. Because the crowd deep down doesn't stand with the one who shouts the loudest. They stand with the one who looks least disturbed. Calmness is magnetic. It makes people wonder what you know that they don't. It makes them question themselves instead of you. That's why every powerful figure in history mastered composure before speech. Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Machiavelli himself. They understood this one law of human psychology. Whoever controls the emotional temperature controls the room. Defending yourself raises the temperature. It makes the air shake. Silence cools it. And people trust the cold over the frantic. Always. So the next time you're accused, misunderstood, attacked, remember this. You don't need to fight for your reputation. You only need to protect your frame. Because truth doesn't need defending, only ego does. And power begins the moment you stop defending your ego. Power is not just about strength, it's about perception. And perception lives in the minds of others. You can be brilliant, right, even righteous, but if your composure cracks for even a moment, they won't see your truth. They'll see your weakness. That's the hidden architecture of every power dynamic. People don't respond to logic, they respond to emotional gravity. To whom seems more centered, more certain, less desperate for control. That's why silence is terrifying, because it radiates certainty. It tells the world, I don't need to prove myself. It tells the attacker, you can't move me. And that unshakable stillness bends the room toward you. Watch what happens when someone insults you in public. The average person tenses up, their tone rises, and their words speed up. They think they're defending their dignity, but what everyone sees is a loss of emotional control. A silent admission, you touched me. But when you stay still, when you neither fight nor justify, you become the calm center of the storm. The attacker looks unstable, emotional, and petty. The audience feels the shift, even if they don't understand it consciously. They start defending you in their minds. They think, that was too harsh. Why is he not reacting? Maybe he's right. And suddenly, the one who attacked becomes the one under judgment. That's how power moves, quietly, invisibly, psychologically. You never tell them you're in control. You let them feel it. Machiavelli would call this the control of the frame, the invisible border that decides whose emotions matter. When you defend yourself, you're stepping inside their frame. When you stay silent, you force them inside yours. And whoever sets the emotional tempo owns the game. Because emotion is contagious. Humans mirror what they see. If you panic, they panic with you. If you stay calm, they begin to regulate themselves around your stillness. That's the essence of presence, the ability to dictate the emotional rhythm of a space. Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. In the same way, everything that provokes you reveals who controls you. Every time you rush to explain, to fix, to justify, you're admitting that their perception defines your self-image. And the Machiavellian mind refuses to give that kind of power away. Powerful people aren't unfeeling, they're selective. They choose where their energy goes. They understand that emotional energy is a finite resource, and they spend it strategically, not impulsively. This is why silence hits harder than any defense ever could. It's not passive, it's tactical. It leaves the attacker alone with their own echo. They start replaying their words, wondering if they went too far, if they made a fool of themselves, if everyone else is silently judging them now. They crumble under the weight of their own overreaction, and all you did was nothing. That's psychological judo. You use their force against them. You let their emotional intensity collapse under its own weight. You don't fight the storm. You let it burn itself out around your calm. This is why Machiavelli said that appearances matter more than intentions. He wasn't being cynical, he was being realistic. People can't read your heart. They read your posture, your tone, your restraint. They don't ask what you feel. They ask, why isn't he reacting? And that question plants a seed of doubt in their mind. The first step toward your psychological control. Power doesn't shout. Power doesn't rush. Power waits. Because the one who waits owns time. And in human interaction, time is the ultimate weapon. When you defend yourself, you surrender time. You react immediately, trying to close the gap of discomfort. But when you delay, when you hold still, when you let the moment stretch just a little longer, the other person starts to break. They rush to fill the silence. They start explaining themselves instead. And that's when you know you've won. The psychology of power is simple, but brutal. The first to react is the first to lose control. The one who explains submits. The one who holds the frame commands the outcome. And if you can master that, if you can train yourself to feel the sting of accusation and still remain motionless, you'll discover something deeper than confidence. You'll discover immunity. Because confidence still reacts. Immunity doesn't. Confidence says, I can handle this. Immunity says, this doesn't even reach me. That's the evolution Machiavelli pointed toward. A man so composed that even when attacked, he doesn't need to defend his truth. He embodies it, and everyone else feels it. That's psychological dominance. That's the foundation of real power. Understanding power is one thing. Applying it when everything in you wants to react, that's the art. Every confrontation is a test, not of truth, not of morality, but of control. And the world, especially today, is a theater of reaction. People are addicted to defending themselves. Online, in relationships, at work, they crave vindication. They think the loudest explanation wins. But in the Machiavellian world, the loudest man always loses first. So how do you flip that dynamic in your favor? How do you stay calm while others collapse into noise? You learn 3 tools: silence, deflection, precision cuts. 1. Silence. The default weapon, the first move is no move. Silence disarms more efficiently than any argument, because it denies your opponent the validation of impact. Imagine a meeting. Someone takes a jab. I don't think your plan's very thought out. Every eye turns toward you. Most people rush to justify themselves. They lean forward, words spilling out in self-defense. And instantly, the room smells of insecurity. But the Machiavellian pauses. He lets the moment breathe. He scans the room, calm, unfazed. Maybe he says nothing at all. Maybe he leans back slightly, eyes steady, lips still. In that pause, something primal happens. The attacker begins to shrink. Their confidence evaporates in the silence. They start to fill the space with nervous laughter, explanations, or excuses. And the audience, without realizing it, shifts its allegiance. Because silence, when charged with composure, commands respect. This is the paradox of power. People will forget what you say, but they never forget how your silence made them feel. 2. Deflection. Turning the blade. The second tactic is redirection. You don't absorb the energy, you reflect it. If someone calls you arrogant, don't say, I'm not. Look past them and say, strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. If they call you manipulative, Don't argue. Respond. Only those who can't be influenced say that. If they call you fake, say calmly, everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. You don't defend, you redefine. You don't deny, you invert. And suddenly, the accuser becomes the accused. They feel the sting of their own projection. Because deflection isn't avoidance, it's psychological reversal. It makes them question their own motives, and the more they explain themselves, the smaller they look. That's what Machiavelli meant by the turn of the blade. You don't meet the sword with a shield. You let the attacker fall on his own weapon. 3. Precision cuts. Words that end the game. Silence is power. Deflection is control. But sometimes, precision is dominance. A single, sharp line, calm, measured, final, can destroy an argument without raising your voice. When someone tries to bait you emotionally, respond with detachment, not explanation. Short, clean sentences. Noted, if that's how you see it, time will tell. Each word closes a door. It doesn't invite more debate. It ends the scene. These aren't defenses. They're declarations of hierarchy. They say, you don't get access to my energy. They re-establish the balance, you above, they beneath. The tone matters more than the words. Calm, grounded. Like you're commenting on the weather, not being accused of anything serious. Because the more unemotional your response, the more emotional they'll become. And the more emotional they become, the more powerful you appear. That's the social algorithm Machiavelli mastered. Emotional chaos always crowns the calmest king. The coldest move, disappear. There's a fourth tactic few dare to use. It's colder than silence, more unnerving than words. It's absence. When someone attacks you, don't reply, don't block, don't acknowledge. Let your absence become a mirror. People crave reaction. It feeds their ego, their identity. When you deny them that, they starve. They start spiraling, posting more, gossiping, reaching out to others to validate their narrative. Each new attempt exposes them further. They begin to look desperate, obsessed, while you remain still, untouchable. Disappearance creates myth. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they invent stories, and those stories often overestimate your power. The less you explain, the more dangerous they assume you are, and that assumption becomes your armor. Aura over explanation in the digital world. People think silence equals guilt. But that's only true when your silence feels like absence. If your silence feels like an aura, it commands fear. When someone accuses you online, don't defend. Don't clarify, distort. Turn their narrative into your legend. Someone says, you're toxic. You post, people always call you dangerous when they can't control you. You didn't defend, you reframed. And instantly, they look bitter while you look composed. That's not PR, that's psychological warfare. Because power isn't about being right. It's about being unreadable. When people can't predict your response, they stop testing you. And when they stop testing you, you've won. The end game in every domain, business, love, leadership, the rule is the same. Never defend. Never explain. Never chase approval. Because the one who explains appears weak. The one who deflects appears sharp. The one who disappears becomes legend. Power isn't noise. Power is stillness. Stillness that burns. Stillness that commands the room without a word. And once you master that, you'll see the world tilt subtly toward you. People will hesitate before speaking your name. Not because you demanded respect, but because you didn't need to. That's the Machiavellian way. You don't conquer with force. You conquer with presence. Machiavelli was never just a strategist. He was a psychologist of the soul long before psychology had a name. He understood that the hunger to defend yourself is not about truth. It's about fear. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear of being unseen. The fear of being rejected by the tribe. And fear, more than any weapon, governs humanity. We defend ourselves not because we're right, but because we want to belong. We want others to see our intentions, to believe in our goodness, to validate our image of ourselves. Carl Jung saw this same impulse at the heart of what he called the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. It's not evil. It's human. But it's also the root of our suffering. Because every time you defend yourself, you strengthen the mask and weaken the self. You polish the image but abandon the essence. You trade authenticity for approval. And the more you do it, the more you forget who you are beneath the performance. You become a collection of reactions, a product of other people's perceptions. That's why Machiavelli's coldness wasn't cruelty, it was liberation. He saw that true freedom isn't found in being loved or understood. It's found in being untouchable due to a misunderstanding. To him, silence wasn't absence, it was sovereignty. It was the ability to let others talk, judge, accuse, and still remain whole. Because if words can wound you, then you're still owned by those who speak them. Nietzsche echoed this in his warning about the herd mentality. He said the man who needs to be understood is still a slave to the crowd. The higher man, the one who ascends beyond the herd, stops trying to explain himself altogether. He becomes a mystery, and that mystery breeds respect. People fear what they can't define, and they destroy what they fully understand. That's why the misunderstood man survives longer, because his depth can't be easily reduced. His silence protects him from mediocrity's reach. We live in a world obsessed with explanation. Every opinion must be justified, every emotion dissected. Every action is defended before the court of public perception. But in doing so, we've lost something sacred, the dignity of mystery. Mystery is not deception, it's depth. It's the recognition that truth doesn't owe itself to everyone. That some parts of your mind, your motives, your essence, are meant to remain unseen. Machiavelli's philosophy, stripped of its reputation, was not about manipulation. It was about self-mastery. It was about removing yourself from the emotional chessboard of other people. Because when you stop defending yourself, you stop playing their game, and only then can you define your own. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And in that sense, defending yourself is a symptom of unconscious control. It's your ego's attempt to steer perception, to control how others see you. But the moment you surrender that need, you no longer live in reaction, you live in definition. This is why stillness feels divine. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. When you no longer need to be understood, you enter the realm of true understanding, a quiet power that doesn't need witnesses. The Stoics called this apatheia, the mastery of emotional response. Not numbness, but sovereignty. The ability to observe chaos without being consumed by it. And the Machiavellian silence is the modern form of that same wisdom. It's the power to stand unbothered in a world built on outrage. To let others scream while you remain composed, not because you don't care, but because you refuse to be owned by noise. This is the paradox of strength. The less you react, the more people feel your presence. The less you explain, the more they seek your approval. The less you reveal, the more they project greatness onto you. And that's how legends are born, not through defense, but through mystery. Because mystery is not confusion, it's reverence. It's the unspoken signal that says, you don't get to define me. When you understand this, you stop chasing reputation. You start embodying reputation. You stop performing strength. You become it. That is the silent transformation Machiavelli understood. You don't approve power, you radiate it. There comes a point in every person's life when the noise becomes unbearable. The need to be liked. The obsession with being understood. The endless chase to prove that you are good, honest, pure. You spend years explaining yourself to people who never cared to listen, and in that effort, you dissolve. But then, one day, something changes. You stop explaining, you stop defending, you simply let the world talk. And instead of breaking you, that silence sets you free. Because the truth is this, you were never meant to be understood by everyone. Understanding is not peace, it's control. People seek to understand you so they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can manipulate you. When you refuse to explain, you deny them that access. You become unreadable. And in a world that feeds on transparency, unreadability is power. That's what Machiavelli truly meant by control. Not domination, not cruelty, but detachment. The art of being so internally anchored that no external voice can define who you are. From that moment, your silence stops being a defense. It becomes a definition. Your calm becomes language. Your stillness becomes presence. You no longer live as a reaction to others. You live as a statement of self. Think about the few people you've met who truly carried that energy. They never rushed to justify themselves. They never explained rumors, never tried to correct gossip or defend their name. And yet, they were respected, even feared. Why? Because silence, when grounded in self-knowledge, creates myth. And myth is stronger than truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To become that person, you must first let go of who you pretend to be, the one always trying to please, to prove, to fix. When you stop defending yourself, you begin to hear something else, the quiet voice beneath all the noise. It's your center, your essence, the part of you that never needed to argue for its worth. That is where power lives, not in the applause, not in being right, but in the calm certainty that your existence doesn't require validation. And from that stillness, life begins to change. Conversations shift. The room is quiet when you enter. Even your silence feels heavy, defined, deliberate. You're no longer reacting to life, you're orchestrating it. This is the Machiavellian endgame. Not to manipulate others, but to master yourself so completely that no accusation, no judgment, no misunderstanding can touch your core. You don't live in defense anymore, you live in definition. And that's where the world begins to bend around you. So the next time someone questions your character, your motives, your worth, don't rush to explain. Look them in the eye, breathe, and remember this. Power is not in what you say. It's in what you choose not to. That's when you'll feel it, the quiet, untouchable freedom Machiavelli wrote about. The freedom that comes when nothing outside you has the power to move you anymore. Because silence, when born from understanding, isn't the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of command. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't let it fade. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, so you'll be the first to know when the next awakening drops. Each week, we go deeper into the psychology of power, the art of presence, and the philosophy that rewires how you see yourself and the world around you. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of today's video hit you the hardest? What lesson are you walking away with? Your words don't just help the algorithm. They help someone else, and reading them wakes them up too. Because awakening doesn't happen alone. It happens when minds meet in truth.